Coming up on AEA Amplified, Honeywell's Global Business Aviation Outlook shows strong demand for new business jets and stable growth over the next decade.
From the Aircraft Electronics Association, this is AEA Amplified, a podcast for aviation's technology experts, with your host, Jeff Hill.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for tuning in as we have some breaking news tonight on the eve of the NBAA convention in Las Vegas. This special episode of AEA Amplified is sponsored by Avionics News, the AEA's monthly magazine available in print, online at avionicsnews.net, and of course on the mobile apps for iOS and Android devices. It is Sunday night, October 20th, 2024, and just a few moments ago, longtime AEA member Honeywell published its 33rd annual Global Business Aviation Outlook. And here to help us dive into all the details on that is Mr. Kevin Schwab. He's a strategic planning manager at Honeywell Aerospace. And Kevin, thank you so much for being here with us tonight to help break it all down for us. And I know many AEA members and the avionics community are familiar with the Honeywell forecast that you publish each year, now in year 33. But just as a quick reminder to our listeners, if you could just give us a quick refresher on the annual report and, describe the methodology behind how you gather the data, how you collect it, where it comes from, and maybe how long it takes you to put together.
Yeah, we're glad to be here with you, Jeff. So like you said, we've been doing this for over 30 years. Really, it's a rolling annual effort. We have a whole team of researchers and forecasters that are constantly checking multiple sources, diving into research about the market across all verticals. And we also have some expert deliberations with other industry experts, other analysts in the industry that we bring and discuss some of the intricacies of the market with them, try to derive meaningful insights together. We also have an operator survey. So each year we survey a contingent of business aviation operators globally. And from them, we're able to get some more detailed insights about what the people who are actually operating these aircraft need, care about, want, their concerns. And we roll all that up together into our forecast. Now we have a couple milestones throughout the year that are kind of important points, and this market outlook that we produce for MBAA is one of those most important milestones. So like I said, it's a year-round effort, but this really is the culmination of a lot of work from a lot of people behind the scenes helping me to put all this together.
And Kevin, I noticed the headline as far as the outlook that was put out sees, quote, stable growth for the next decade. So exactly how many new business jet deliveries should the industry expect between 2025 and 2034? And what does that dollar value equate to?
Yeah, so we're expecting to see 8,500 new jet deliveries during the next decade. And that's a dollar value of about $280 billion. This is a slight uptick in value over our forecast last year. And we're seeing similar trends in terms of the mix of aircraft. So about a third will be small jets, about a third will be medium jets, and about a third will be large jets. And because of the high values of the large jets, that third is going to represent about 2/3 of the delivery value over the next 10 years.
And Kevin, I see that one of the other report's key findings is that purchase plans indicate that demand for new aircraft is normalizing at an elevated level, significantly, say, above pre-pandemic figures. So what else can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're seeing. So we had a couple year period from about 2020 to 2022 or so of really strong demand for business jets. And we, as an industry, were not able to satisfy the demand in that period due to many of the supply constraints that were going on at that time. We're seeing some systematic improvements in supply chains, which is enabling the OEMs to ramp up production to get to these new higher level of deliveries. So we expect that to happen over the next couple of years. And once we get to this new higher level, which in 2025, we expect to be about 16% above 2019 levels in terms of unit deliveries. We expect stable growth on top of that to continue for the next 10 years after that.
And I also see that your report indicates that the aircraft utilization is projected to increase, and that's with the vast majority of operators planning to fly more or the same as they did this year in 2024. How did your research point to that statement?
Yeah, so we ask operators directly how kind of what they intend to do in their operation, whether they're going to fly more, fly less, what purposes they're flying for. So we ask them directly. That's part of our operator survey. And what we found was about 90% of them said that they were going to fly more or about the same next year as they are this year. And there's actually, we asked a little bit of a deeper level question on that this year and found that those operators who are already utilizing their aircraft at higher levels, more of them said that they were going to fly even more next year. So kind of the way I frame it up is the high flyers that already are going to fly even higher next year. And when looking at the operators that are at like the lower to mid-level utilization, most of them said that they're going to fly about the same next year, but there still was a decent cohort of those operators that said they were going to fly more next year as well.
That sounds like it's certainly good news. And once again, we are visiting with Kevin Schwab. He's the strategic planning manager at Honeywell Aerospace here on AEA Amplified, sponsored by Avionics News. And Kevin, uh, the report's a lengthy one. Can you tell us what some of the other key findings that stand out to you?
Yeah, definitely. So we had a couple interesting sections on the operator survey this year. So one of the sections was on what are the important factors, or I'll call them drivers, of the purchase of a new aircraft. So we had almost 40 individual drivers or considerations that folks think about when considering purchasing a new aircraft. And we took those roughly 40 parameters and we put them into 6 different kind of categories. Those categories being performance, cost, customer support, cabin experience, OEM reputation, and technology. And what we found was overall in those categories that the number one category was performance. So 82% of operators said that performance is in their top 3 priorities when considering purchasing a new aircraft. And 60% of operators said that cost is in their top 3 priorities. And within those 2 buckets, those are the top 2 out of the 6, really the number one purchase driver that rose to the top was range. So more people said that range was their number one priority than anything else. And in terms of other performance characteristics, there's actually rounding out the top 5 in the performance category was max payload, field performance, and speed. So the performance category had 4 different, pieces of the performance equation in the top 5 purchase drivers overall. And again, that's out of about 40 individual ones. And then on the cost front, cost was another really important one. The number 2 overall driver was low operating cost. So that really helped cost come to the top. But notably, within the top 10 out of the 40, residual value and acquisition cost also were up there. So in terms of cost, again, low operating cost was number 2, but still in the top 10 out of 40, whole value and acquisition costs were also really important.
And Kevin, as we mentioned earlier, Honeywell's done this now for 33 years. So I got to ask, and I'm sure you probably haven't done it all 33 years yourself, but when you look back historically over the long-term history of the report, how accurate is the report when you look back in hindsight?
Yeah, so this is a really important topic, that the concept of forecast accuracy and tracking that. We talk about this on our team almost weekly. We have many different types of forecasts, and we're always trying to figure out how to improve them. The cyclical nature of the aerospace industry is well documented, but the larger shocks that sort of happen to the nature on a cyclical basis are usually due to unforeseen events, and so those things are very, very hard to predict. However, in the periods of more kind of normal growth, we do understand pretty well what the correlating key performance indicators are for the business jet industry. It's things like GDP, new aircraft development, oil price, inflation, things like this that all sort of factor in from a macroeconomic standpoint. So during periods of normal activity, our forecast comes pretty close. Like I said, it's kind of the black swan events that make it very challenging to forecast this industry in the long term. And as various things play out in actuality, we spend a lot of time diving into the actual performance of some of these metrics and making sure that we're correlating our models with some of these actual things that are happening in the industry over time. And so we're constantly improving and trying to improve our models wherever we can to improve our forecast accuracy.
And Kevin, before I dive you into the our final 4 questions, just for fun, are there any other interesting nuggets from the report itself that you'd like to point out or like to mention?
Yeah, any other interesting things? I'll talk a little bit about for sustainability. So we did ask for a few years now. We've been asking about sustainability and business aviation. So this year we asked those operators who are actively taking steps to minimize their carbon footprint, what are the steps that they're taking, right? What are the methods that they're using? And 60% of those operators said that they're purchasing new, more fuel efficient aircraft, and 55% of them said that they are using sustainable aviation fuel. And we dove into the sustainable aviation fuel topic in a little bit more detail, and we asked all operators, regardless of if they're taking proactive steps, what are the main obstacles they see to more widespread adoption of SAF in the industry. And the top 2 here were cost and availability. So those remain, and I think that that makes a lot of sense. We've been seeing this for a few years now. Cost and availability of SAF is still just tough. The pricing is still pretty high, and it's not being produced quite at the levels where the economies of scale will kick in. So we expect that to kind of improve and get a little bit better over time. But a couple other interesting points that came out on the obstacles to SAF. These weren't the majority of respondents, but I would say more respondents than we expected said things like risk to aircraft reliability, lack of environmental impact, and lack of awareness were reasons why SAF is not being adopted more widely. So our view on this is that SAF is a kind of a complex topic when you get into it, right? It depends on what blends there are, whether it's a drop-in fuel, how it's being produced, and you're calculating the environmental impact of it. There's just a lot of elements and a lot of complexity to SAF. So we suspect that there's an opportunity for us as a business aviation industry to produce more education or just materials to share with operators to help them understand, what fuels they can use, right? What fuels are certified, right? Because a lot of the engine makers are certifying their engines for different SAF usage, but it's not always obvious what type, right? So things like that. We think that there could be more education in the community, and that's a part of of these obstacles that maybe we have control over, right? That maybe we can tackle as an industry.
I'm glad you mentioned that. SAF is certainly not going away, and it's a topic of utmost importance within the entire aviation industry. So I'm glad you clarified some of that for us. And so now, as I mentioned, it's time for our final 4 questions for you, sponsored by Avionics News. And this is just a fun exercise that allows the avionics community and our listeners to get a chance to know you better on a personal level. And so we're just looking for the first thing that comes to your mind and why you feel that way on our final 4. I know as an Arizona Wildcat, you'll be used to this since they've been in the Final Four quite often. So we'll jump right into it. All right, number 1.
Not as often as we'd like.
All right, number 1. How did your career get started in the aviation industry?
Yeah, my career probably started when I was a small child. I have loved airplanes for as long as I can remember. And the first indicator to me was I would be building Legos with my friends, and everybody else is building like buildings and trucks and and cars and all this kind of stuff. Every single Lego set I ever put together had wings and it could fly. And I was like, my Legos look way different than everybody else's Legos. And that's when I was like, I think I like airplanes.
Yeah.
uh,
Okay.
and that persisted throughout my teen years, where I started to get really curious about how aircraft fly. And so I went to school for aerospace engineering straight up to learn how aircraft fly. And I knew that I wanted to think about airplanes on a daily basis in my career. So that's how I kind of ended up here.
All right, very good. All right, question number 2 is besides putting the Honeywell forecast together here, tell us about some of your other experiences and responsibilities that you have at the company.
Yeah, so a lot of it does center around not just forecasting, but market research, right? Trying to understand the business aviation market and community and operators. How are people flying these planes? What are the needs for these planes? Where are some shortfalls? How can we help support this particular part of the industry? So a lot of my effort right now goes into that, and of course, it can come with a focus on. We have a wide range of products that we offer. And so that means that there's a wide range of different types of aircraft that we're constantly looking into. And that is very fun. Before I had this role, I was an engineer within our engines and power systems unit for about 10 years. So I spent about 10 years either managing conceptual engine design projects or doing performance analysis on our advanced engines and APUs.
All right, very good. All right, question number 3 is who has been your most important professional mentor?
I have been very fortunate to have several fantastic mentors in my time here at Honeywell. I started at Honeywell right out of college, and over that time, a bunch of names come to mind: Ted Alford, Jeff Turner, Vanessa Dwinell, Alberto Beltran, Sam Wellington. All these people have had a lot of impact on me developing as a professional. But I have to say, the one that stands out the most uh, out of all of my mentorship I've had has to be my dad. My dad is also an engineer who took an analytical mindset more into the business aspect of his company, and he did business development kind of with that mindset, and that was revolutionary for his industry. So he has a lot of guidance and has always provided me with support and mentorship all the way from when I was a kid up through the challenges of getting a couple engineering degrees and into my professional career.
That's awesome. Good parenting right there. That's awesome. All right, now question number 4, the fourth and final one here is: what am I missing? Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners that we haven't covered today?
Yeah, well, I'd like to flip this back on you and ask you a question.
All
And I
right.
will
Okay.
answer my own question, but for you, I always like to hear the answers from other people in the aviation industry. What is your favorite air or space vehicle and why?
Wow. Okay. Well, you've stumped the host. Okay. You mentioned going back to your childhood, your youth with the Legos. So for me, honestly, I would say it's the space shuttle program. I remember growing up as a child. My parents and I too had good parents. They, fortunately, I'm very thankful for that. But I remember, waking up whatever time it was when we had the first space shuttle launch, and
Wow.
waking up it wasn't in the middle of the night, but it was certainly much earlier than we were used to waking up. And but you had to see it. You had to see it, and then you had to see that first landing. And right there was kind of the spark for me. So for me, I would you can't go wrong with the space shuttle program. So
That is fantastic. Yeah, and in similar vein for me, I have probably a different vehicle for every different market, including sea and land and everything. But for me, I've always loved airplanes, and when I was growing up, the F-22 was in development, and that plane could do things at the time, and still can do things that are absolutely remarkable. And so, kind of in line with me wanting to learn how things fly, that thing just looks awesome when it is doing some of its maneuvers. So I loved it. I think I did a presentation on it in middle school to my classmates, and did research on it back then. So
yeah.
that's really one that stands out for me.
That's awesome. And Kevin, thank you so much for joining us here on a Sunday night here on AA Amplified to talk about your 33rd annual Global Business Aviation Outlook from Honeywell. And of course, if you want to see that report and learn more about the details that are in it, you can go to the Honeywell website at honeywell.com. And if you happen to be at the NBAA convention this week, You'll be able to see Kevin in person at the Honeywell booth over at the Las Vegas Convention Center. So stop by the Honeywell booth and check it out. Also, for our listeners, don't forget that the early bird registration, believe it or not, is now open for the 2025 AEA convention, and that is in Phoenix, Arizona, which is the hometown there of Honeywell Aerospace. So I know Kevin and his entire crew will certainly be at the show this year in full force. So if you register by the end of the year, by December 31st, you will save $235 off the on-site registration rate. So that's a good deal with the early bird. Take advantage of it today at aea.net/convention. Also, as we continue moving forward here in our fall season, there are several opportunities to take advantage of avionics training in the classroom. Those in-person courses are at AEA headquarters in Lee Summit, Missouri, and we also offer virtual live classes if you are unable to travel. So seating is limited for each of those courses. You can check out the descriptions for all of them and reserve your seat at aea.net/training. And then finally, there are only 2 AEA regionals remaining on the calendar for this year. So please, if you are in Europe, for our Europe members, plan to join us in Copenhagen, Denmark, November 12th and the 13th for the Europe regional. And the AEA East regional is going to be in Jacksonville, Florida, November 21st and 22nd. So make plans now to join us for 2 days of technical training and professional development by registering at aea.net/regionals. And that is going to wrap it up for today. Thanks so much for joining us on AEA Amplified, sponsored by Avionics News. And also thanks to Kevin Schwab for being our guest today. Until next time, for our producer engineer, Aaron Ward, this is your host, Jeff Hill, wishing you blue skies ahead. Have a great day, everybody.